Some query. So it often happens that the DAO, generic DAO that's given to us doesn't quite do what we want, right? And we want to override its behavior, and we want to have our own queries. Maybe we want to join a whole bunch of tables, right, with a whole bunch of primary keys and foreign keys, and it just doesn't cut it, right? The default implementation doesn't cut it. So for instance, one of the things that it can't do, for instance, it can retrieve things by primary key, but it can't retrieve anything by any of the other fields. Maybe I want to retrieve by username. Maybe I want to retrieve by username and password. See if that this person exists when they're logging in. See if this username and password exists. So let's take a look at that. Let's implement one that I can retrieve by username. So to use it by username, what we do is that obviously we don't want to have to implement the whole thing, right? So in the repository, what we could do is say, I can tell you the query, the SQL query I want you to use. Okay? I can say if I want to retrieve somebody by, say, public user find user by username, right? I need to give you the username, and then I'd like to then tell you how to query that. Yes? But instead of doing this, where I would need the connection, I would need to use JDBC and do all that, instead, it allows us to do that also programmatically or by configuration. What we can do here is say, use the following query. Use the following query. The value is that I want you to use select star from users where user dot username is equal to some placeholder, right? Equal to some placeholder, where it needs to be mapped to this somehow, right? So we're going to put a placeholder here, says username. Okay, so somehow we need to map this parameter that's coming in through the function, map it to this over here. Notice that it's complaining. Let's see, expression distinct, expression got star. Maybe are you? Okay, we do need to say that it's native, meaning I am using a native query. I'm going very low level. I'm using the database's dialect. Presumably, I know the vendor I'm using, and this query is going to verbatim go to the database out, right? So native is true, meaning don't try to interpret this. Right? The only thing that I want you to interpret is that I want you to paste here this username that I'm going to give you. That's the only interpretation I want you to do, right? All right. So to the mapping, we can say that this is a parameter, a path parameter. Or just parameter, param, I think it is. Is it param or parameter? I think it's param. And I need to map it. I'm saying here that this parameter, this path parameter, this parameter over here maps to this string here. Okay. All right, there we go. So let's try it out. Let's see. Let's go to our controller and let's try and find the user by username. So we'll say public user find user by username and we're going to we're going to say repository dot find user by username. One of the cool things about using these queries is that you no longer get these optional. You get the object right away, unwrapped nicely. So, the username I might say maybe Alice, right? And here we get the user Alice, and we can just return just Alice. No need to unwrap. No need to do any of that. We do need to map this to some URL, and maybe we'll say users or username, and this will be the username. And the username, we're going to map it to Alice over here. So this we're going to read from this path here. So this is path variable username there, I'm going to map it to this string username. And map it to this, copy in here. All right, so let's try it out, see if this blows up. All right, so let's try it out. So we go here and instead use, I forgot what the usernames were. Usernames were A Wonder, B Dylan, and D Brown. Okay, so let's try A Wonder. So this would be user name, A Wonder, broke. What? Username? Username. Did I misspell something? Path variable. In where? In the repository? It says select star. What is it? Users. Oh. Yeah, I was just checking on you. Oh, and by the way, let's create another one just because we're here. Let's create another one where find by credentials. How's that? Credentials. And credentials might take two parameters, right? Username and password. And password. And here you might have usernames and users and password. And password here, huh? How's that? And in the controller, it might have another finder, right? That might have a find user by credentials, credentials, which might, and this might be called credentials, and this might put first username and then the password, right? And we might parse out from the path the password, and then we can do here you find by credentials, and we pass in both the username and password. How's that? So let's try those two. Did I make a mistake? Oh, password. Thank you. Aha, you're listening. Good. So there it is. So we have both username and password. Let's try it out. Where? Username, password? Yep. In the other query? This one? It's just username, right? Oh, the interface? So password. Oh, password, yeah. Excellent, very good, thank you. Good teamwork. Let's build that. Let's run that. Let's run that, and let's try and hit this. Okay, there's Alice. And who else was there? Let's D Brown. Yeah, brings Dan Brown, right? Or if I want to do by credentials, I can say credentials. And the next one would be maybe Bob Dylan would be username is QWE. Copy. And the username is B Dylan, sorry. So B Dylan / QWE, and that returns B Dylan, right? Which could be used like for login or checking to see if the credentials for somebody, right? Obviously, you would not do it on a URL. You would do maybe a post or something like that and encrypt it and blah blah blah. But so anyway, so yeah, there they are, right? Now, there's a big problem from this approach. The big problem in this approach is that I am using this string, this low-level SQL, which again binds me. Well, obviously, this is very, very common, very simple SQL, right? So most vendors will behave the same way, regardless of what the vendor. They're going to understand this query. Yes, right? But you can imagine that I could be using some keywords here that would be specific to the vendor, right? And so this URL, this string, now would make me not independent from the vendor, right? So we want to stay away from this native equal true. Native equal true. Instead, we want to use a much higher level version of this. Right? So I'm going to copy this. Oops. I'm going to copy, paste it. I'm going to comment that out. And instead, what I'm going to use is a different language, not low-level SQL. Instead, we're going to remove this native query. Instead, we're going to be using, instead of SQL, we're going to use what is called JPQL, right? JPA query language. Okay? And it has the following thing, the following syntax. I'm going to select user, right? Where user, select user from user, right? Where this user is not the table name, it's a class name. Right? Again, what JPA tries to do is to make you independent of the relational database, right? And allows you to keep as much as you can, try to let you stay just in the object world, right? So if we now we're saying select all the users that are of type user, where user.username is equal to username. Okay, now this username is not the field username, right? Not the field in the database, not the column username. This username is the class property username. Okay, if this were first name, if I was selecting somebody by first name, for instance, I would say first name, right? Because this is at the object level. If I were using native query, then I would have to use the name of the column in the database. Make sense? See the difference? Right? So JPQL allows you to stay in the object world and forget about the low-level SQL that this might be converted into. Right? So this username is the class variable username, not the column username. Right? Also here, it's not the table users, right? It's this user instance, right? So let's change all of these. Let's convert this to. So this would be user. So same thing. And this would be username and user.password. And it's not native. And when it's not native, you don't really need the value. You just use the string. You just take the string. You don't need to say value, just a string. All right, so let's try that. Let's see if this blows up. Notice that Hibernate is kind of outputting, right, with the queries that it's using underneath to talk to a database. See that? So if we run it again, okay, it's working just as before, right? So we haven't broken anything. Or if you say by username, a wonder retrieves Alice. Yes? Excellent. So JPQL works just fine.